Okay, so we're gonna learn how to do the tessellation using the graph paper. You're gonna need a piece of graph paper, piece of tracing paper, and here we go. The first thing I would do is I would step down 1, 2, 3 rows and over 1, 2, 3 columns and put a dot. Okay, and then if you step over 8 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That, at least on this piece of graph paper, is 2 inches. And then we'll step down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then over, making a square that is 2 inch by 2 inch. Same as our previous technique where we use the tag board. All right. So we're going to do the same technique to start with that we did with the tag board, where we draw a line that goes from the upper left corner to the lower right corner. But because we're doing it on tracing paper, we don't have to draw just inside the square. We can go outside the square as well. So you don't have to draw yours to look like mine. But we're going to draw a line. It goes from that upper left to the bottom right. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Maybe you can see a little better. Okay, once we have that line drawn on there, we're going to lay our piece of tracing paper on there so it's covering the whole graph, all of the graph paper. And I'm going to trace over that line. I also drew kind of an oversized dot at the start where my corner was. I find that to be helpful later. And a dot there. Okay. So next, and this part I really want you to watch because it can be a little confusing if you're not truly paying attention. I'm going to put my pencil right here on this corner, and I'm going to pivot my tracing paper so that it moves down a quarter turn. Now, if this line is interfering with that line in any way, whether it's touching it or overlapping it, then I'd have to start over. I'd have to fix the first line, which would, of course, affect the second line. But if it's not a problem, if it looks good, then I'm going to transfer this image or this line onto the graph paper by just sneaking my pencil underneath and putting some dots where my corners are. Okay, now that I know that that's where they are, I'm going to just draw those lines. And then I'll lay this back in place just to make sure that it's the right thing. Okay, so the next thing I want you to do is I want you to turn your tracing paper back around, put it in its original position, and trace over that second line that you made. And like I did before, I got exaggerated corner there. Okay, I'm going to move my tracing paper aside. Move my tracing paper aside. And I'm going to draw a new line that goes from this upper left dot to the upper right dot. It does not have to look anything like the first one. If you don't want it to, that's totally fine. But we do need to be aware that because this area here is kind of close to this area here, the line that we're about to make, it's going to swing down and touch this dot down here. So if I make my line go real big up here, it's going to interfere with that. So just be aware that to start, you don't really want to go up. You'd rather go down. Okay? All right, so I drew my line. Now I'm going to lay my tracing paper back in place. And I'm going to trace that line. And this time I'm going to use this upper right corner as my pivot point. And I'm going to turn my tracing paper get down there just a little bit further. And I'll use the same technique that I did before and transfer the dots or the corners. And then finally I'll trace over that line I just drew onto my tracing paper, making a complete tessellation piece. Okay, so now I have my tessellation piece that's on this tracing paper. If I rotate this down here, it fits into place. If I rotate it this way, it fits into place. If I rotate it up, it fits into place. If I rotate this way, it fits into place. So this works as a tessellation piece. So the next thing I need to do is I need to decide, what is this thing? Is it a bird? Is it a fish? Is it a person? Is it a dog? What is it? So I can use my imagination. I can turn it any which way I want. And I tend to see birds when I'm doing this one. I said before that, that the cutout ones, they tend to make me think of fish, and then this one definitely makes me think of birds. So I'm going to just add some lines. So I see a bird, and you're welcome to work on yours while I'm working on mine. Okay, so I want to kind of give you an overview from the previous lesson and this one. So here we go. I'm going to pull this back just a bit so we see this. If you liked the stencil idea, then what your image will look like when you're all done is this. Basically, you'll just take your stencil and you'll just repeat it, stacking one piece on top of another, and then coloring it using a minimum of 2 colors so you have contrasting fish, contrasting shapes. Okay? If you liked this one, then what you would do is repeat that shape over and over again so it fills the paper, and it would end up looking something like this, where you have the same shape being repeated and then coloring it using a minimum of 2 colors. Okay? There is a third option. You could take this shape, design one thing, rotate it, and design a second thing, making 2 different, in my case, birds, but with the same shape. And if you decide to do that, what you'll end up with is 2 different birds. You got a pink bird with a yellow beak, orange wings, and a blue bird with an orange beak and light blue wings, filling the whole paper. Okay? Or if you really want to challenge yourself, you could make something like this. Every single tessellation piece is different from the ones around it. So this fish interlocks with that one, but they do not actually have the same shape, and therefore you have 2 different fish. And this fish interlocks with that fish, but again, this one does not have the same shape as that one, nor does it have the same one as that. Every fish on here has a different shape to it. If you are interested in this one, you'll have to let me know on an individual basis, and I can walk you through how I made this. But I will be truly honest with you, this hurt my brain developing this. It was a lot of thinking and a lot of trial and error to really get it to work out. My goal is to take this stencil, and obviously it's still a graph paper, transfer it onto a good piece of paper, and then use ink to outline it, add shading and whatnot, so each fish